StudyIQ IAS, आपका सिलेक्शन हमारा मिशन।
Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll talk about what hate speech actually means or why still in 2025 we still haven't been able to counter hate speech in India. Okay, that we'll understand in a detailed manner. Now, the notes that I will be using in our today's session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it downloading the notes, which are free of cost, first of all, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also for such similar updates and notes in the future. Now let us understand why have we picked up the topic of hate speech for our today's discussion, and there is a very good reason for that. This good reason is introduction of a bill specifically targeting hate speech in the Legislative Assembly of Karnataka. Now you need to understand, despite the word hate speech being frequently used in the media, in public discourse, even today no criminal law in India, center or state, exactly defines what a hate speech is. And this creates a legal vacuum, a legislative lacuna. And because of this legal vacuum, a legislative gap, what we have seen that enforcement of any instances of hate speech has been inconsistent, and even when they have been done, they are depending upon the subjective interpretations of existing laws by law enforcement officers. And because of this legislative gap, because of this improper execution of the law, we have seen increasing hate instances in India. So much so that the Supreme Court of India have said this: there exists a climate of hate in our country. Do you want your country to be associated with a climate of hate? Most obviously no. So that is why understanding this issue is important. But what is more important is understanding why still we haven't been able to bring a law that specifically defines what a hate speech is. Now, that doesn't mean that India does not have any law for that matter to control instances of hate speech, because presently there are scattered provisions in India's criminal laws, most particularly the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita (BNS), which was earlier called as Indian Penal Code, which deals with instances of hate speeches. For example, Section 196, it deals with promoting enemies or enmity between different groups. Section 299, which again was present in Indian Penal Code, it deals with malicious acts which outrages your religious feelings. Third is Section 353, which prevents publishing of statements which incite offences against any community or even for that matter state. So these are the provisions available in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, which allows the government or law enforcement agencies to deal with issues of hate crime, at least partially, right? But the problem with these laws is that their orientation is towards preserving the law and order. Its orientation or objective is to preserve public order, not targeting or not concerning or protecting any targeted vulnerable groups, which originally is the intention of hate speech. So there is a lacuna in terms of objective of these laws. Now, to deal with online hate speeches, there was a Section 66A of IT Act, Information Technology Act 2000, but this act was invalidated, or this particular section was invalidated by the Supreme Court in the Shreya single case in 2025 because of its frequent misuse by different law and order authorities. And because of this legislative lacuna, because of this improper definition of hate speeches, you have to understand the conviction rate of people who are accused of hate speeches is very low, as much as 20.2%, which is not at all sufficient in a diverse society like India. You need to give different sections of people, different vulnerable groups at least, methods which could allow them to protect against hate speeches, right? Now let us understand, whenever there is a legislative lacuna, whenever there is a legislative gap, that gap always is filled by judicial interventions. Sometimes many people say that these judicial interventions are more of a judicial overreach. But let us understand how Supreme Court in India particularly has tried to fill this legal lacuna. In 2022 and 23, the Supreme Court gave certain directives to first few state governments and then extended it to all the state governments in India. It stated, in absence of a formal complaint, a police can't wait to take actions against hate speeches, because they can even take or register cases on their own, that is on suo motu basis. Similarly, if police or law and order authorities hesitate to take actions against hate speeches, this would invite charges of contempt, which the court will ensure. Similarly, the Supreme Court also noted few of the lacunas which exist. It says that the real problem lies not in the absence of laws, but real problem lies in implementation of the laws despite several judicial guidelines. And the reason for this is difficulty in defining hate speeches, because hate speeches faces many complexities which might be related to semantics, which might be related to the contextual development of that issue, right? Similarly, in 2023, Supreme Court also stated that it is impossible for judiciary, particularly Supreme Court, to monitor each and every instances of hate crime. So the primary responsibility to tackle and implement hate speech legislations is of police and of High Court. And in that matter, Supreme Court also gave them a reference of Tehseen Punewala judgment. In Tehseen Punewala judgment, Supreme Court wanted to develop a framework for preventive policing as well as developing accountability of police officers. And not just that, it also mandated of setting up of nodal officers who will be in charge of preventive mob violences instances, one of which is a hate crime, right? Now you need to understand that there have been many instances in the past that have tried to define hate speech. The first natural way to do that was of Law Commission in its 267th report, which came in 2017. In this recommendation, the Law Commission first of all proposed introduction of new sections in the erstwhile Indian Penal Code, sections dealing with incitement of hatred and sections dealing with causing fear, alarm and violences. Similarly, the Law Commission also recommended that you need to change the orientation of these laws from preserving law and order to checking or prevention of violences, especially done against the vulnerable group. The second genuine attempt to define hate speech came in a form of private member bill, which was introduced in Lok Sabha in 2022. This private member bill first of all defined what a hate speech is. It stated an expression which incites or justifies or promotes or spreads discrimination, hostility or violence, that is a hate crime. And under this hate crime, all the vulnerable sections, wider vulnerable sections were covered. So this was the second genuine instances. Now in this regard, why is Kerala's legislative bill so important? You need to understand Karnataka's legislative bill so important. You need to understand Karnataka here, after introducing this bill, would become a first ever state in India to do so, to tackle hate crimes in India. And similarly, this proposed legislation borrows important provisions from the Law Commission's 267th report and the 2022 private member bill. So let us understand what are the important provisions of this Karnataka Legislative Assembly's bill on hate speech and hate crime. First of all, it defines hate speech. So the first problem that we understood, it is covered in the Karnataka's bill. It states that hate speech is an expression which causes disharmony specifically targeted against a group of people. And this targeting of group of people might be on the basis of their race, religion, caste, gender, even sexual orientation, place of birth and disability. What is more important for you to note, that inclusion of sexual orientation and gender, it brings under the protection of this law a wider category of people, which we see happens in our day-to-day lives, right? So they now will be protected under this specific instances of Karnataka bill. Not just that, this bill also introduces a feature or a provision of collective liability. Suppose if a company is involved in a hate speech, so not just the company is criminally liable, but also the people who are in effective places of management in those bill, people of responsibility, are also subjected to prosecution under this criminal laws. They will be deemed guilty. Now this concept actually shifts accountability not just from individual but on an institutional basis also. Similarly, this bill also empowers the state government to take actions against online hate speech, which we have understood was present before the Shreya Singhal case judgment, and after it became invalidated because of the Shreya Singhal case. Okay. Now these are the important provisions of Karnataka bill. Now, before completing this topic, understanding the constitutional dimension of this topic is very important. First of all, in India, there is no absolute freedom of speech and expression. Exercise of fundamental right in India, particularly freedom of speech and expression, is subjected to reasonable restrictions which are present in Article 19 subsection 2 of the Indian Constitution. This Article 19.2 states that in cases of violation of public order, decency, morality, or even to prevent incitement of violence, the state can impose reasonable restrictions. And one of these reasonable restrictions is a law against hate speech. Because yes, you're living in a democracy, you have freedom of speech and expression, but you can't use this freedom to negatively impact or threaten the life and security of another section of people, either individual or groups of people, right? Similarly, government, while bringing any legislation against hate speech, needs to balance two different rights. On one hand, there is a freedom of speech and expression, and on another hand, there are different sets of rights. First is right to equality, which is covered under Article 14. Second is right to non-discrimination, which is covered in Article 15. And third is right to dignity, which is covered under Article 21, because Article 21 has been multiply interpreted as a right which not just provides you life, but a life of certain dignity, right? So all of these needs to be balanced, because we have to ensure right to equality, because we have to ensure dignity of people. That is why we can't let free speech violate all of this, and this is the reason why such laws are brought in the first place. Now there is a possibility of misuse of these laws, and that brings me to the challenges and critiques of the law. First of all, whenever a political class brings these kind of laws, it brings forward the risks of using these laws to seek political vendetta, to curb dissent, right? So in India, everyone is equal, but some people, just by the virtue of coming into power, think themselves as more equal than others, and they can misuse these laws to prevent natural criticisms, which is a beautiful aspect of our democracy. Similarly, there is a definitional vagueness. First of all, it is very difficult to draw a boundary between a criticism, satire on one hand, on offenses and hate on another, right? What separates it? This is subjected to subjective interpretations, right? Third is the implementation problem. Now you need to understand, policemen or police officers in general, they are more receptive to the mechanical implementation of laws. When it comes to application of mind, when it comes to understanding the context of the laws, police officers are not specially trained for it. So while bringing this law, you also need to train police officers so that they don't end up misusing such kind of a laws. Another challenge is potentially overlapping with central laws. Now, this law has been introduced because of the powers given to state government under concurrent list. But what happens when two different laws, one of central government and one of state governments, intersect or they collide with each other, right? How a specific provision would prevail? That remains a question. Third is internet takedown powers. Now you need to understand, exercise of free speech is much more vociferous, much more extreme on the medium of internet. So there is also a possibility that such kind of a speech, although may not be inflammatory, may not be hate speech in particular, might be damaging on the social environment of the society. So how is government going to tackle that? That also remains to be seen. So these are the potential challenges and criticism such kind of a laws usually face. Now, before solving a PYQ based question, I have an important announcement. The topic that we just did right now is a topic important from polity perspective. Now, you need to understand, in UPSC exam, you need to prepare multiple subjects, not just polity, but economy, history, geography, internal security, international relations, etc., etc. Now, to cover all of these subjects, you can naturally do on your own, but that creates multiple possibilities or difficulties. For example, you won't be able to stay disciplined throughout your preparation. Second problem is, where would you get a quality content, not just from sufficient from exams perspective, but also in helping you understand those complex topics. To deal with all of these challenges, the answer is very simple. Just take my advice, take admissions in Resolution Plus batches. These batches not just provide you classes where teachers make you write notes, they give you handwritten notes, but also it provides you one-to-one mentorship so that any doubts that might crop up during your exam preparation cycle, you'll get it solved easily. Similarly, you will also get access to prelims and mains test series so that when you're done learning, you are able to practice the questions much before the actual exam. And this cycle helps you improve your learning on a continuous basis, right? So all of these benefits are exclusively available in Resolution Plus batches, which are available separately for students looking to give exams in 27 or in 2028. Taking admissions, you need to remember two things. First of all, a batch is starting from 9th of December. Second is that if you use the code ATS Live, you'll get maximum discounts on all the courses of StudyIQ IAS, right? So please remember, use the code ATS Live and get maximum discounts on all the courses. This is all from my side. There is a question that I'd want each and every one of you to solve. This is exactly on the basis of UPSC pattern. Right to dignity under the Indian Constitution is derived from which one of the following articles? Please do let me know the correct answer in the comment section, and the ones who answer it correctly will get a thumbs up from my side. Okay, so please have a very good night. You can download the notes on this channel, and this is all from my side for today. We'll see each other again at 9 p.m. tomorrow.
StudyIQ IAS, आपका सिलेक्शन हमारा मिशन।